Book title: The Iron Triangle, The Unbreakable Laws of Enduring Success. Introduction: The Blueprint for the Fortress. Stand for a moment in the heart of Berlin, near Potsdamer Platz, and you'll see it. Or rather, you'll see what's left of it. A single, colossal portico, its sandstone arches blackened by a history it barely survived, stands desolate against the modern skyline. This is all that remains of the Anhalter Bahnhof. In its day, this was not just a train station. It was a cathedral of travel. Opened in 1880, it was known as the Gateway to the South, a magnificent structure of iron and glass that rivaled the grandest palaces in Europe. Kaisers and chancellors walked its platforms. It was the largest and finest railway terminus on the continent, a symbol of German engineering, ambition, and power. Today, it's a ghost, a facade. Heavy bombing in World War II shattered its body, and the subsequent division of Berlin sealed its fate. The Grand Station was demolished in 1960, leaving only this fragment of its entrance, a memorial to something that was once great, but could not last. Now, travel 1,000 miles south and a couple of thousand years back in time, to the heart of Rome. Step through the towering bronze doors of the Pantheon. Look up. Your gaze is pulled into the oculus, the unglazed opening at the apex of its perfect coffered dome. For nearly 2,000 years, rain and sunlight have fallen on the same marble floor. It was built by Hadrian around 126 AD, and it has never fallen into ruin. It has been a Roman temple, a Christian church, and now a tourist destination and a tomb for Italian kings and artists like Raphael. It has survived barbarian raids, the fall of empires, the stripping of its bronze by popes, and the relentless pressure of time. It endures. Why? Why does one magnificent structure fall, becoming a hollowed-out curiosity, while another far older still stands as solid and functional as the day its scaffolding was removed? It wasn't luck. It wasn't that the Anhalter Bahnhof was unlucky or that the Pantheon was blessed. The difference is not in their materials or even their purpose. The difference is in the design. The Pantheon was built on an unshakable foundation, with an architectural integrity so profound that its strength has become the stuff of legend. The train station, for all its grandeur, was ultimately vulnerable. It was a product of its time, and it died with its time. This is not a book about architecture. It's a book about you. Because the same question applies to our lives, our careers, our ambitions. We see it all around us. The people who rocket to success, who seem to have it all, the followers, the title, the money, the attention, only to collapse at the first sign of pressure. The startup founder who is a genius on paper, but implodes during the first downturn. The artist who has one hit and then vanishes. The executive who climbs the ladder only to find themselves miserable and empty at the top. The influencer, whose entire identity is a carefully curated feed, a digital facade as fragile as the Anhalter Bahnhof's ruin. Modern success has become a performance. It's often a fragile structure, built on fleeting trends, hollow metrics, and the shaky ground of external validation. It's designed to look impressive, but it has no foundation. It has no fortitude. When the bombs of adversity fall, and they always fall, it shatters. This book is about building something different. It's about building something that lasts. True enduring success, the kind that withstands chaos, the kind that you can rely on when things get tough, the kind that brings not just achievement but fulfillment, is not stumbled upon. It is engineered. It is built like a fortress. It is built on 3 interlocking sides of what I call the iron triangle: knowledge, the foundation; skills, the walls; attitude, the watchman. Think of it this way. Knowledge is the bedrock. This isn't about acing a test or being a walking encyclopedia of trivia. It's about a deep and practical understanding of the world, of your field, of human nature. It's seeing things as they are. It's the hard-won wisdom you get from studying the greats, from seeking out timeless principles, from understanding the terrain. Without a solid foundation of knowledge, anything you build is on sand, destined to shift and collapse. Skills are the walls. Knowledge alone is useless if it stays in your head. Skills are knowledge made real. They are the tangible ramparts you build through discipline, practice, and relentless application. They are the ability to write, to speak, to lead, to create, to focus, to build. While your foundation of knowledge allows you to understand the world, it is your skills that allow you to act upon it. They are what protect you and project your power. But even the strongest fortress is vulnerable without a guard. That's attitude. Attitude is the watchman on the walls. It is the inner philosophy, the mindset that governs how you see the world and respond to it. It's the stoic discipline that sees an obstacle not as a barrier, but as a whetstone. It's the stillness that allows for clear thought in the middle of a crisis. It's the courage and resilience that keep the gates from being overrun by fear, despair, or ego. You can have all the knowledge and skill in the world, but if your attitude is weak, you will leave the gates of your fortress wide open to be sacked by the first enemy that comes along, especially the enemy in win. This isn't just a metaphor. It's a blueprint. This book is a guide to constructing your own inner fortress, your own iron triangle. We will not be dealing in life hacks or fleeting trends. We will be looking to the timeless wisdom of the men and women who built things that lasted. The philosophers, the generals, the artists, the leaders, the entrepreneurs. We will study the architects of the pantheon, not the designers of the temporary facade. We will learn to lay a foundation of knowledge, to build the walls of our skills brick by painstaking brick, and to train the vigilant watchmen of our attitude. The world will throw its storms at you. Fortune will be fickle. People will betray you. Your own mind will conspire against you. The question is, what have you built to withstand it all? A stage set that will splinter in the first gust of wind, or a fortress built on the iron law of the triangle that will stand strong, a base from which you can not only weather any storm, but launch your own campaigns into the world. Let's get to work. Let's start building.
Part 1. The foundation, knowledge. To know is to build on bedrock. Chapter 1. See the terrain, not just the map. The sea has a way of stripping you down to what you actually know, not what you think you know, not what you've read in a manual, but what is burned into your bones. No one knew this better than Tristan Jones. Jones was a man carved from salt and sea spray, one of the most accomplished sailors of the 20th century. By the 1980s, he had sailed more miles than almost any man alive. On his boat, a rugged craft named Outward Leg, he decided to do what no one had done before: sail the lowest body of water on Earth, the Dead Sea, and the highest, Lake Titicaca in the Andes. This absurdly ambitious journey was what he called the Incredible Voyage. To get from one to the other, he had to navigate some of the most treacherous waters on the planet, including the perilous trip around Cape Horn. His small vessel was equipped with the best technology of the day: echo sounders, radar, satellite navigation systems. He had all the maps, the detailed charts, the weather forecasts, the digital readouts. He had, in theory, a perfect picture of the world. Then, in the furious, icy chaos of the South Atlantic, the sea decided to test him. A massive wave, a graybeard, smashed over his boat. And in an instant, everything went silent. His modern electronic equipment was fried, the lights went out, the digital screens were blank. His maps were just paper now, his GPS a useless piece of plastic. He was alone, thousands of miles from help in a storm with icebergs lurking in the gloom. Many sailors would have panicked. They would have been lost, adrift, because their knowledge was entirely dependent on the map. But Tristan Jones was different. He knew the map, yes, but more importantly, he knew the terrain. With his electronics dead, he went back to the old ways. He pulled out his sextant, a tool that looks ancient to our modern eyes, and in the brief, fleeting moments when the storm clouds parted, he would get a sight of the sun or the stars. He used these celestial bodies, the same ones the Phoenicians used 3,000 years ago, to find his position. He understood the feel of the boat, the color of the water, the smell of the air, the patterns of the waves. He had an intimate, first-hand knowledge of the sea itself. The waves weren't just data on a screen. They were living things he understood. The stars weren't just dots. They were a compass. Tristan Jones survived. He rounded the Horn and eventually completed his impossible journey. He survived because his knowledge wasn't a fragile, second-hand thing. It was bedrock. When the map disappeared, he could still read the terrain. We are all navigators now, trying to make our way through the world, and we are drowning in maps. We have more information at our fingertips than any emperor or scholar in history. We have endless articles, podcasts, YouTube tutorials, Twitter threads, and breaking news alerts. We can download the summary of any book, skim the highlights of any philosophy, and get the key takeaways from any lecture. We have become kings of the map. We can talk a good game about business strategy, political theory, or personal finance. We collect facts, figures, and talking points. We have, in short, mistaken the menu for the meal. This is not knowledge. This is its ghost. This surface-level familiarity creates a dangerous illusion of competence. It's the person who has read a dozen books on entrepreneurship but has never made a payroll or dealt with an angry customer. It's the executive who has memorized all the latest management acronyms but has never sat down with a struggling employee to understand what is actually going on. They have a beautiful, detailed map, but they are utterly lost because they have never set foot on the ground. The first pillar of the iron triangle, the foundation of knowledge upon which all else is built, is the discipline of seeing things as they are. It's about tearing your eyes away from the map and learning to read the terrain. The terrain is reality. It's messy, unpredictable, and often unpleasant. It doesn't care about your theories or your expectations. It simply is. To build anything that lasts, a career, a business, a life, you must build it on this reality. You must build it on bedrock. So how do we do this? How do we train ourselves to see the terrain? First, we must relentlessly question the map. The ancient Stoics had a practice for this. When confronted with a powerful impression, Marcus Aurelius would systematically break it down into its objective parts. That prestigious award? He'd call it what it is, a bit of shaped metal and a public opinion. That delicious vintage of wine? It's just fermented grape juice. The point wasn't to be a cynic, it was to strip away the story, the hype, the map, and see the thing itself. We must do the same. When you hear about a revolutionary new technology, ask, what does it actually do? What problem does it solve? When you see a viral marketing campaign, ask, how many of those views converted to actual sales? Deconstruct the narrative. Find the objective reality underneath. Second, we must get our hands dirty. The Japanese have a principle in manufacturing called genshi genbutsu, which is often translated as go and see. Toyota, one of the most successful companies on the planet, built its empire on this idea. If there's a problem on the assembly line, you don't solve it by reading reports in a boardroom. You go to the factory floor. You stand there for hours. You watch the machine. You talk to the operator. You touch the materials. You go to the source. You see the terrain. In your own life, this means closing the book and making the sales call. It means stopping the tutorial video and actually writing the code.
It means getting out of your office and walking the floor, talking to your customers, using your own product. Direct experience is the chisel that carves knowledge into your soul. Finally, we must understand the fundamental principles of the terrain. Tristan Jones knew navigation, but he also knew oceanography, meteorology, and astronomy. He understood the deep, underlying forces that governed his world. For us, this means we can't be content with surface-level tactics. We have to understand the core principles of our chosen field. If you're in business, you can't just know marketing tricks, you must understand human psychology. If you're a writer, you can't just know grammar rules, you must understand narrative structure and human emotion. This is the hard work of digging past the symptoms to the root causes. It's the difference between a medic who can put on a bandage and a surgeon who can repair the underlying injury. Building your foundation on this kind of knowledge isn't easy. It's slower, it's less glamorous. Skimming headlines and spouting trivia makes you feel smart. Digging for bedrock is hard, dirty work, but it is the only thing that will hold the weight of real ambition. The world wants to sell you maps. Easy, attractive, ready-made guides to success. It wants you to stay in the boat, looking at the screens, trusting the forecast. The path to lasting success, to building an unshakable fortress, requires you to do what Tristan Jones did. It requires you to have the courage to look beyond the map, to learn the stars, to feel the wind, and to see the world not as you wish it were, but as it truly is. That is your ground. Now you can begin to build.
Chapter 2. Steal from the Greats. They want you to. There is a story about General George S. Patton, though it may be more legend than fact, that tells you everything you need to know about him. They say that during the Sicily campaign in 1943, he stood on a dusty hill overlooking an ancient battlefield, a place where Romans and Carthaginians had once clashed. As his aides discussed modern logistics and troop movements, Patton was elsewhere. "You know," he is said to have whispered, his eyes scanning the terrain, "I have been here before." Patton, a devout believer in reincarnation, felt he had been a soldier in these ancient armies. A silly superstition? Perhaps, but don't miss the real story. Patton hadn't just studied the great commanders of history, Caesar, Scipio, Napoleon, Alexander. He had devoured their campaigns so completely that he felt he had stood beside them. He walked the ground they walked, breathed the air they breathed. He read their words, analyzed their decisions, and reverse-engineered their genius. When he looked at a map, he didn't just see topography. He saw Napoleon at Austerlitz. When he planned a flanking maneuver, he was channeling the audacity of Hannibal at Cannae. He wasn't just reading history, he was raiding it. He was stealing the fire of the gods, not to mimic them, but to forge a weapon of his own. His encyclopedic knowledge of military history wasn't trivia, it was a live, dynamic part of his mental operating system. And this, right here, is the second layer of our foundation. Once you have committed to seeing the terrain as it is, you must populate that terrain with the wisdom of those who have navigated it before you. You must become an active and ruthless student of the greats. We have a strange relationship with the past. We treat it like a museum, a place for quiet, respectful observation of things safely behind glass. We read a biography or a classic text and say, "How interesting," and then place it back on the shelf unchanged. This is a profound waste. A library is not a museum. It is an armory. The words of the dead are not exhibits. They are weapons, blueprints, and operating manuals. They are a council of the wisest, most brilliant, and most courageous minds in history, waiting to be consulted. Marcus Aurelius is ready to teach you how to lead with tranquility under pressure.
Seneca is waiting to show you how to handle grief and master your anger. Sun Tzu has a masterclass on strategy that is yours for the taking. Plutarch has a portfolio of character studies showing you which virtues lead to greatness and which vices lead to ruin. And the best part? Their consultation fees have been paid in full. All they ask is your time and your attention. The modern world has tricked us into a passive consumption of information. We scroll, we skim, we listen at 2x speed. We collect quotes for our Instagram bios and book titles for our Twitter threads. We are accumulating ammunition, but have no idea how to load the rifle, let alone aim it. To build a foundation of knowledge that can actually support something, you must adopt a different philosophy of reading. You must read for armament. You are not reading to be entertained. You are reading to arm yourself for the challenges of life and work. So how is it done? It is a simple but not easy practice. First, read with a pen in your hand. Reading should not be a passive intake. It is a conversation. Underline passages that strike you. Write questions in the margins. Argue with the author. Connect an idea in this book with one from another. As Seneca advised his friend Lucilius, you must make what you have read your own. Your books should not be pristine artifacts. They should look like they've been through a war, dog-eared, marked up, stained with coffee. A book you haven't written in is a book you haven't really read. Keep a commonplace book or a note card system, a central repository for the wisdom you plunder. This is how you distill what you read into usable intelligence. Second, read what has lasted. The siren song of the new and the popular is deafening, but most of what is published today will be forgotten tomorrow. It's noise. The surest sign of a book's value is its endurance. Read the books that have survived for decades, for centuries, for millennia. They have been vetted by the ultimate test, time. Start with the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, Seneca's Letters, Epictetus's Discourses. Read the strategists, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, and the brilliant, lesser-known John Boyd, whose concept of the OODA loop is a master key for decision-making. Read the biographies of giants like Plutarch did to see how character is forged in the crucible of consequence. Reading what everyone else is reading will only teach you to think like everyone else. Reading the classics will teach you to think like the people who shaped the world. Finally, you must integrate, not just aggregate. The goal is not to become a walking Wikipedia. It's to build, as the investor Charlie Munger says, a lattice work of mental models in your head. A truly knowledgeable person doesn't just have a collection of disconnected facts, they have a web of interconnected ideas. As you read, constantly ask yourself, how does this apply to my life right now? How can I use this idea at work tomorrow? How does this lesson from the Roman Empire explain the problem my company is facing? You are taking the raw material from the armory and forging it into a tool custom-made for your own battles. Patton didn't win battles by asking, "What would Napoleon do here?" He had internalized Napoleon's thinking so deeply that his own strategic instincts were sharper, faster, and more potent. The greats are not gods. They were people. They struggled, they failed, they learned, and they wrote it down. They want you to steal from them. That is the entire point of their legacy. They are holding out their wisdom for you to take. It is the height of arrogance and foolishness to refuse the gift. So, pick up a real book and a pen. Stop scrolling and start studying. Go to the armory. Learn from the dead so you can let better. They are the best mentors you will ever have, and they are waiting for you to show up for your lesson.
Chapter 3. The Library in Your Head. In 1727, a 21-year-old printer in Philadelphia gathered a group of his friends. They weren't the city's elite. They were a dozen leather-aproned tradesmen and ambitious young thinkers, a surveyor, a cabinet maker, a glazier, a clerk. This was not a social club for idle chatter. This was a forge. He called it the Junto. Their rules were simple and serious. Every Friday night, they would meet to discuss a series of questions. Had they recently read anything interesting? Had they observed a failure in a local business and considered the cause? Did they know of a citizen who had recently thrived, and why? They debated morals, politics, and natural philosophy. Each member was required to produce an essay on a topic for the group to dissect. The goal, in the founder's own words, was to engage in a sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, without fondness for dispute or desire of victory. The founder of this club was, of course, Benjamin Franklin, and the Junto was arguably his greatest invention. It was a crucible where half-formed ideas were hammered into shape, where one man's knowledge of economics could be combined with another's understanding of mechanics and a third's grasp of human nature. The Junto wasn't just a reading group. It was a living, breathing, collaborative brain. It's what transformed a group of ambitious tradesmen into the leading citizens of their day, and Franklin himself into the most versatile genius of his. They weren't just collecting knowledge, they were connecting it. And in that simple distinction lies the final critical element of building the foundation of our fortress. It's not enough to see the terrain clearly. Chapter 1. It's not enough to steal from the armory of the greats. Chapter 2. If all that wisdom sits in isolated stacks, it's useless. True knowledge, the kind that creates real power and insight, is a web. We live in an age of hyper-specialization. We are the experts in our own tiny silo. The marketing guy knows funnels and conversion rates, the engineer knows code and system architecture, the finance person knows spreadsheets and discounted cash flow. We burrow deeper and deeper into our narrow trench, and we celebrate it as expertise. But we are blind to the world outside that trench. This is the curse of the specialist. As the old saying goes, to a man with only a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. The marketer tries to solve a product problem with more ads. The engineer tries to solve a people problem with more code. They are intelligent, they are well-intentioned, but they are crippled by their one-dimensional view of the world. They have a single, powerful tool, and they use it for everything, whether it fits or not. To build a truly unshakable foundation, you must escape this trap. You must build what the brilliant investor Charlie Munger, partner to Warren Buffett, calls a latticework of mental models in your head. Imagine your knowledge as a library. For most people, it's a collection of individual books on separate shelves. A book on economics here, a book on psychology there. They never speak to each other. A latticework approach builds a different kind of library. It's a library where the ideas from each book are woven together. The goal isn't to build a library where every book is in its own locked room. It's to build a library where the ghosts of Aristotle, Adam Smith, and Sigmund Freud can argue in the margins of your mind. A mental model is simply a big idea from a discipline that helps explain how the world works. It's a tool for your cognitive toolkit. When you have a wide array of these tools, you can look at a single problem from multiple angles. You are no longer the man with a hammer. You are the master craftsman with a full workshop. So how do you build this library, this latticework? First, you must actively seek out the big, foundational ideas from disciplines outside of your own. You don't need to become a PhD in physics, but you should know the basics of concepts like leverage and entropy. You don't need to be a psychologist, but you are a fool if you don't understand the model of confirmation bias, our tendency to see what we want to see, or the power of incentives, the single most powerful force in economics and human affairs. You don't need a degree in philosophy, but learning the Stoic model of inversion, thinking about a problem backwards by considering what you want to avoid, will solve more problems than you can imagine. These are the load-bearing walls of your mental library. Second, you have to force the connections. This is the real work, the Junto method. When you face a problem, at work, at home, in a relationship, don't just reach for your favorite hammer. Stop and ask, what would a biologist say about this? Maybe it's an ecosystem problem, not a single cause problem. What would a psychologist say?
Are cognitive biases at play? Is it a matter of incentives? What would a historian say? Has this pattern appeared before? What was the result? You must become your own junto. Talk it out. Write it out in a journal. Argue the different points of view with yourself. You take the problem and you turn it over and over, examining it through the lens of different models. In doing so, a hidden solution, one you could never have seen from your single perspective, will often appear with stunning clarity. This is what it means to have a true education. Not a diploma on the wall, but a library in your head. It is the hardest part of building your foundation, because there is no curriculum. No one will hand you a reading list. You have to be driven by an insatiable curiosity, a desire to understand the world, not just in your little corner of it, but as a whole. This is the final piece of our bedrock, a foundation that is clear-eyed about reality, a foundation built with the granite of timeless wisdom stolen from the greats, and a foundation that is cross-braced and reinforced with the latticework of powerful ideas from every domain of human knowledge. It is a formidable thing to construct, but once you have it, you can build anything upon it. It will hold. Build a library in your head so vast and interconnected that no single problem can ever find you unprepared.
Part 2. The walls. Skills. To do is to build the ramparts. Chapter 4. The hands of a craftsman, the mind of a philosopher. For centuries, the sea kept a deadly secret. Out of sight of land, a ship's crew knew their latitude, their position north or south, easily enough from the sun. But longitude, their position east or west, was a phantom, a deadly, invisible ghost. A miscalculation of a single degree meant a ship could be 60 miles off course. This was more than an inconvenience. It meant ships laden with treasure slamming into reefs they thought were miles away. It meant crews starving to death as they sailed in circles, unable to find their destination. It meant navies arriving too late for battle. The longitude problem was the single greatest scientific challenge of its age. In 1714, the British government, desperate for a solution, offered a prize worthy of the problem, £20,000, a king's ransom, equivalent to millions of dollars today. The greatest minds in the country, the astronomers and mathematicians of the Royal Society, men like Isaac Newton and Edmund Halley, set to work. They had the knowledge. They had the pedigree. They had the finest theories. Their solution was predictably cerebral. It was called the lunar distance method, a fantastically complex system of measuring the angle between the moon and a star to calculate the time in Greenwich. It was brilliant. It was elegant. On the deck of a rolling pitching ship with a sky full of clouds, it was also nearly impossible. The academics were looking at the map. They were in their observatories, in their libraries, deep in their foundation of knowledge. And then there was John Harrison. Harrison was not an academic. He was a carpenter and self-taught clockmaker from the countryside. He was a man with calloused hands. He had no formal education, no fancy title, no royal connections. He was a craftsman. And he had a different, simpler idea. He knew that to find longitude, all a sailor really needed was a clock. A very, very good clock. A clock that could keep perfect time at sea, allowing a ship to know the time in Greenwich and compare it to the local time to find its position. The experts scoffed. It was impossible. A pendulum clock wouldn't work on a moving ship. The expansion and contraction of metal with temperature changes would throw off the time. The humidity and salt of the sea air would corrode the delicate parts. All true. All excellent points based on existing knowledge. But John Harrison did not just have knowledge in his head. He had it in his hands. For the next 40 years of his life, Harrison did the work. He didn't write papers.
He built things. He took the theoretical problem and made it a physical one. He disappeared into his workshop, a place that must have looked like a madman's laboratory of wood, brass, springs, and gears. He embraced the slow, often tedious process of turning an idea into a reality. When he saw a problem, he invented a solution. Wood warping with humidity, he invented a gridiron pendulum using alternating brass and iron rods that canceled each other's expansion. Lubricants getting sticky in the cold, he created a clock that needed almost no lubrication, inventing the caged roller bearing in the process. He built his first sea clock, H1. It was a magnificent beast of brass and wood. It worked, but it wasn't perfect. So he built another, H2, then H3. Each one was an iteration, a lesson learned from the failures of the last. Each failure was not a setback. It was data. It was the terrain talking back to him. This wasn't abstract thinking. This was a brutal, physical dialogue between a man and the unyielding laws of physics. This was deep practice. Finally, after a lifetime of labor, he produced H4. It wasn't a giant clock. It was a beautiful, oversized pocket watch. In 1761, it was sent on a sea trial to Jamaica. After 81 days at sea, it was found to be only 5.1 seconds slow. John Harrison, the carpenter, had solved the longitude problem. The craftsman, with his hands, had built a wall of skill so high and so strong that it achieved what the greatest minds, with only their knowledge, could not. This is the second side of our iron triangle. Your foundation of knowledge is essential, but it is useless if it stays in the ground. You must build upon it. You must build walls. Skills are those walls. Skill is knowledge made manifest. It is the bridge between theory and reality, between knowing what to do and actually being able to do it. We live in a culture that is obsessed with the foundation and despises the wall building. We love ideas. We fetishize disruption and life hacks. We want to read the book that will change our life, not do the work that will. We want the flash of insight, not the decades in the workshop. We want the knowledge, but we secretly hope to skip the skill. This is a fool's errand. The world does not pay you for your foundation. It pays for your walls. It rewards what you can do. Building these walls is not complicated, but it is hard. It is the part of the journey that requires you to get your hands dirty. It is, in a word, the work. First, it requires that you embrace the mindset of the craftsman. A craftsman is not afraid of tedium. A craftsman understands that mastery is the cumulative result of thousands of small, well-executed movements. Whether you are a writer, a coder, a leader, or an athlete, you must fall in love with the process of practice. You must, as the author Jeff Colvin wrote, engage in deep practice. Not just mindless repetition, but purposeful, focused effort at the edge of your abilities. It's about isolating a component of your craft, working on it, getting feedback, and refining it until it's second nature. Second, it requires an apprenticeship. Like Franklin's Junto, you must submit your work to scrutiny. This might be a literal apprenticeship under a master. More often, it will be an apprenticeship to the greats living or dead. When you learn to code, you study the work of the best programmers, taking their code apart to see how it works. When you learn to write, you don't just read for pleasure. You dissect the sentences of your favorite authors. You type them out to feel the rhythm in your own fingers. You are submitting yourself to a standard, trying to see the world through the eyes of a master. John Harrison was a testament to a simple, powerful truth. A good idea is nothing without the skill to execute it. His knowledge of the problem was the foundation, but his skill, honed over a lifetime of patient, frustrating, brilliant work, was the wall that protected ships and sailors from the chaos of the sea. Stop just accumulating knowledge. Stop waiting for the perfect idea or the perfect plan. Stop theorizing and start building. Pick up your tools, whatever they may be: a keyboard, a paintbrush, a spreadsheet, a team. Lay the first brick, then lay another. That is the only way the wall gets built. It's the only way to build something that protects you, that projects your power, and that actually matters in the real world.
Chapter 5. The Unfair Advantage of Speaking and Writing Well. In May of 1940, civilization was holding its breath. The Nazi war machine, a juggernaut of steel and terror, had smashed through France. The British Army was trapped, its back to the sea at Dunkirk. Defeat seemed not just possible, but imminent. In London, in the halls of power, there were whispers of a negotiated peace, of surrender. The situation was, by any objective measure, catastrophic. And into this abyss of despair stepped a man who, by many physical measures, was unremarkable. He was 65 years old, overweight, and had a slight lisp he had fought his entire life to control. He was not a warrior king like Alexander or a tactical genius like Napoleon. His skills did not lie on the battlefield. They lay in his larynx and at the tip of his pen. His name was Winston Churchill, and his weapon was the English language. On the radio, in the House of Commons, in memos and telegrams, Churchill began to build a new reality. He did it with words. He did not sugarcoat the truth. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. He acknowledged the grim situation, but then he reframed it, not as an ending, but as a test of character. He spoke of a miracle of deliverance at Dunkirk, and then, as the threat of invasion loomed, he gave the British people and the world the words that would become the foundation of their defiance. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender. Listen to those words. Simple, direct, powerful, almost entirely composed of single-syllable words like a drum beat. This was not the flowery, complex prose of an academic. This was the work of a master craftsman who understood that words are not for decoration. They are for moving people to action. Churchill, through his absolute mastery of writing and speaking, forged a weapon that was more powerful than any tank division. He wielded language to build a wall of national resolve, a fortress of the mind from which a beleaguered people could fight back. This is the multiplier X. This is the skill that makes all your other skills matter. You can have the most brilliant idea in the world, but if you cannot articulate it, it will die in your head. You can be the most talented engineer or artist, but if you cannot explain your vision, you will not get the funding, the support, or the attention you need. You can have a deep foundation of knowledge and strong walls of technical skill, but if you cannot communicate, you are a fortress without a gate, unable to project your power into the world. The ability to write clearly, speak persuasively, and negotiate effectively is the ultimate meta skill. It is the operating system that runs all your other software. And yet we neglect it. We think of it as a soft skill. We treat it as secondary to our real work. This is a catastrophic mistake. Churchill knew this. He wasn't born a great orator. He was born with a speech impediment. He became a master through painstaking, deliberate practice. He spent years as a journalist and historian, writing for a living, learning how to structure an argument and turn a phrase. He would rehearse his speeches for hours, mouthing the words, finding the rhythm, anticipating the effect on his audience. He treated communication with the same seriousness that John Harrison treated his clocks. It was his craft. Building this unfair advantage in your own life does not require Churchillian eloquence. It requires a commitment to 3 fundamental practices. First, write to express, not to impress. The curse of the modern professional is the belief that smart people use big words and complex sentences. This is nonsense. The goal of writing is to transfer an idea from your head to someone else's with as little distortion as possible. Jeff Bezos famously banned PowerPoint presentations at Amazon in favor of 6-page, narratively structured memos. Why? Because a well-written memo forces clarity of thought. You can't hide behind bullet points. You have to make a real argument. Your task is to chisel your sentences down until they are clean, simple, and strong. Use short sentences. Use simple words. Cut every word that is not doing essential work. Clarity is power. Second, speak with conviction. Persuasive speaking is not about a slick delivery or a booming voice. It is about believing what you are saying. Churchill's power came from the fact that his audience knew he was not faking it. He had spent his whole life studying history and politics. He knew the stakes. To speak well, you must first know your material inside and out. But then you must connect it to a core conviction. Speak plainly. Make eye contact. Let your genuine belief in your message be the engine of your words. People are moved by authenticity far more than they are by polish. And finally, learn to negotiate by listening. We think of negotiation as a battle of wills, a verbal boxing match. This is the amateur view. A master negotiator, like a master communicator, knows that the real work is in understanding the other side's position. It's about asking questions. It's about listening, truly listening to what they want, what they fear, and what they need. Once you understand their terrain, you can frame your own needs and proposals in a language they will understand. The best negotiation isn't about one person winning. It's about clear communication leading to a mutually beneficial outcome. Your knowledge is your foundation. Your technical abilities are your walls. But the skill of communication is the mortar that holds it all together and the gate through which you engage the world. It is the difference between a pile of bricks and a fortress. Do not treat it as an afterthought. Work on it every day. Edit your emails mercilessly. Volunteer to give the presentation. Practice explaining a complex idea to a friend. Read your own writing aloud. This is the work that will give you your unfair advantage. It is the skill that gets your other skills hired, funded, and followed.
Chapter 6. Master the art of not being duped. If you had wanted to build the perfect investment firm in the mid-1990s, you would have ended up with a team that looked exactly like long-term capital management. This was not just a collection of smart people, this was a pantheon. The firm's boardroom was a blinding constellation of intellectual firepower. It included John Merriweather, the legendary near-mythical head of bond trading from Salomon Brothers. And on his team were 2 men,
Myron Scholes and Robert C. Merton, who in 1997, at the height of the firm's success, would travel to Stockholm to accept the Nobel Prize in Economics for their groundbreaking work on options pricing. These were not just the smartest guys in the room. They were, officially, the smartest guys on the planet when it came to financial risk. They had the ultimate foundation of knowledge. Their technical skills in quantitative analysis were sharper than anyone's, and they had built complex computer models that they believed had all but solved the problem of risk. Their strategy was to find tiny, temporary pricing discrepancies in global markets and make enormous, leveraged bets that these prices would inevitably return to normal. It was like a machine designed to suck nickels off the sidewalk, except it was using a billion-dollar vacuum cleaner. For 4 years, it worked with breathtaking success. They generated returns of over 40% annually. They were hailed as geniuses. They had, it seemed, built the perfect fortress, an impregnable structure of pure intellect. And then they were utterly, catastrophically annihilated. The spark came in August 1998, when Russia unexpectedly defaulted on its domestic debt. It was an event their models had considered so unlikely as to be statistically impossible. It was a 10 sigma event, something that shouldn't happen in the entire lifespan of the universe. It was a freak wave, and it hit their fortress broadside. Suddenly, investors all over the world panicked. Instead of behaving rationally, as the models predicted, they fled to safety. The tiny pricing discrepancies that LTCM had bet on did not converge. They diverged wildly. Their small, safe losses began to cascade. In the space of a few weeks, the firm lost $4.6 billion. The losses were so massive, so leveraged, and so intertwined with every major bank on Wall Street that the Federal Reserve had to orchestrate a massive, unprecedented bailout to prevent the collapse of the entire global financial system. The smartest guys in the room had failed. Their fortress, built on a flawless foundation of knowledge and towering walls of technical skill, had crumbled to dust from the inside out. Why? It wasn't their math that was wrong. It was their humanity. They lacked the one skill that is more important than all the others. The skill that serves as the master mason, inspecting every brick and every joint in the walls you build. It is the skill of self-management. It is the skill of not being duped by the most dangerous person of all. The greatest threat to your fortress does not come from the enemy outside your walls. It comes from the traitor within. It comes from your own ego, your own blind spots, your own emotions. The call is coming from inside the house. Mastering the art of not being duped by yourself is the most difficult and most critical skill you will ever build. The men at LTCM were blinded by a lethal cocktail of cognitive biases, the same ones that lie in wait for you and me every single day. They were victims of overconfidence bias. They were Nobel Prize winners. They believed they were smarter than the market. Their early success confirmed this belief until it became an article of faith. They were so convinced of their own brilliance that they couldn't imagine a world where they could be profoundly wrong. As the philosopher Epictetus warned, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. They were victims of confirmation bias. Their models were their sacred texts. They looked for and found endless data that confirmed their worldview. They ignored the small, nagging signs that the world was messier than their equations. They surrounded themselves with other brilliant people who all thought the same way. There was no one in that boardroom to play the role of the dissenter, the skeptic, the one who asks the dumb but essential question, but what if we're wrong? They built a fortress of skill, but left the postern gate of their own psychology wide open. And when the pressure came, when fear and panic gripped the markets, their own emotions, the very human variables their models ignored, came flooding in and brought the whole thing down. So how do you build this essential, fortress-protecting skill? It's not taught in schools. It doesn't come with a certificate. It is forged in the daily practice of ruthless self-awareness. First, you must practice the pre-mortem. Before starting any major project or making any big decision, take a page from the psychologist Gary Klein. Assemble your team and say, imagine it's a year from now, we have failed, utterly. What went wrong? This simple exercise flips the script. It forces you and your team to actively hunt for weaknesses. It makes it safe to voice doubt. It systematically counteracts the overconfidence and confirmation bias that are our default settings. Second, you must actively seek disagreement. Do not build your own echo chamber. Find the people who see the world differently, who have different skills and different experiences. Make them your advisors. When you have an idea, don't take it to the people who will pat you on the back. Take it to the person most likely to tear it apart. Franklin's junto was not a club for mutual admiration. It was a club for mutual improvement through honest, critical debate. And finally, you must journal. The Stoics did this. Patton did it. Countless leaders and thinkers have done it. Why? Because the act of writing down your thoughts, your decisions, and your fears forces a level of clarity and objectivity that is impossible to achieve in the swirling chaos of your own mind. It creates a record you can go back to. You can see your own patterns of thought, your own recurring biases. It is a mirror that shows you the parts of yourself you would rather not see, and you cannot fix what you cannot see. The story of LTCM is a cautionary tale of the highest order. It shows that knowledge and skill are not enough. Without the discipline to manage yourself, to see your own flaws, and to think clearly under pressure, your strengths become your greatest weaknesses. The walls you build to protect yourself become the walls of your own prison. This is the hardest skill to learn because it requires the one thing we hate most: admitting we might not have all the answers. But it is the skill that keeps your fortress standing when all others fall.
Part 3. The Watchman. Attitude. To be is to guard the gates. Chapter 7. The obstacle is the whetstone. Picture the most powerful man in the world, not in a gilded palace, not in a serene library surrounded by scrolls and sycophants. Picture him in a damp tent, the smell of mud and leather thick in the air. Outside, the unyielding German winter gnaws at the edges of the camp. This is the frontier of the Roman Empire, along the cold, dark banks of the Danube River. The man is Marcus Aurelius, emperor, and his world is on fire. Back in Rome, the Antonine Plague is scything through the population, killing millions. His own wife may be unfaithful. His most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, will soon betray him and declare himself emperor. And here, on the front lines, he is fighting a brutal, seemingly endless war against barbarian tribes. He is tired. He is surrounded by death, disease, and disloyalty. He is facing a mountain range of obstacles. This is where he sat, night after night, by flickering lamplight, and wrote. Not a memoir, not a list of complaints, not a cry for help. He wrote to himself, a series of private notes on how to live, how to be a good man, how to navigate the chaos that was his life. We know these notes today as his meditations. They are arguably the single greatest book ever written on the subject of self-mastery and resilience. And what did he write about in the face of all this horror? He wrote this: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that again. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not the pep talk of a modern self-help guru. This is a profound strategic insight forged in the crucible of unimaginable pressure. This is the foundational attitude of the vigilant watchman. What is our default response when something gets in our way? We resent it.
We curse it. The traffic jam that makes you late, the critical feedback from your boss, the project that fails spectacularly, the client who pulls out at the last minute, the unfair criticism, the unexpected expense. Our reaction is almost the same. Why is this happening to me? We see the obstacle as a barrier, a frustration, a detour, an injustice. This is the attitude of the amateur. It is the attitude that guarantees you will be miserable and weak. The Stoic attitude, the attitude of Marcus Aurelius, is radically different. The obstacle is not an unfortunate interruption of your plan. The obstacle is the plan. It is not a bug, it is a feature. It is not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced and used. The obstacle is a whetstone. Think about it. What does a whetstone do? It's an abrasive, unpleasant block of stone. Its job is to provide friction. A knife might not enjoy being scraped against a whetstone, but the friction is precisely what sharpens the blade. Without the abrasive resistance of the stone, the blade would remain dull, useless. Every challenge you face in life is a whetstone. It is an opportunity to sharpen a specific tool, a specific virtue within yourself. The obstacle doesn't just get in the way of your work. The obstacle is the work. This is not a passive philosophy of just accepting things. It is an active, offensive strategy. It is a practical guide to transmuting the ugly, frustrating, and painful parts of life into strength, character, and power. How do we do this? How do we stop complaining about the whetstone and start using it? It starts with a pause. The moment the obstacle appears, the rude email lands, the flight is canceled, the market crashes, you must train yourself not to react emotionally. Create a space. In that space, you ask one simple question. What virtue can I practice right now? That's it. That's the entire exercise. Stuck in that soul-crushing traffic jam, you see it not as a personal injustice, but as a whetstone for the virtue of patience. You can't control the traffic, but you can control your response to it. You can choose calm over rage. The traffic jam is your dojo for patience. That rude, insulting email from a colleague, it is a whetstone for the virtue of forbearance and magnanimity. Your first impulse is to fire back a sarcastic reply. The Stoic response is to pause and see it as an opportunity to practice restraint, to rise above the pettiness, and perhaps to reply with unshakable, disarming clarity and calm. Your big project just failed. The product launch was a flop. This is a whetstone for resilience, humility, and analysis. You can complain and blame, or you can use the failure as a tuition payment for an invaluable lesson. You can study the wreckage, learn from your mistakes, and get back to work, stronger and smarter than before. This is the job of the watchman at the gates of your fortress. He doesn't panic when an enemy appears. He doesn't curse the enemy for showing up. He sees the enemy as an opportunity to test the defenses, to gather intelligence, to strengthen the guards. Every obstacle is a stress test for your foundation of knowledge and your walls of skill, and the watchman's job is to use that test to make the entire fortress stronger. This attitude is the ultimate source of power. Other people, external events, they can take your money, your job, your reputation, but they cannot take away your ability to choose how you respond. They can throw obstacles in your path, but they cannot stop you from using those obstacles to practice courage, patience, and creativity. Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by things he couldn't control, so he focused exclusively on what he could: his own character, his own mind, his own responses. The plague, the war, the betrayal, these were all just whetstones, sharpening him into the philosopher king we still study 2,000 years later. Don't pray for an easy life. Don't wish for a path with no obstacles. That is the path of a dull blade. Instead, have the courage to see every challenge for what it is: a gift, a chance to get sharper, stronger, better, an opportunity sent by the gods to prove what you're made of.
Chapter 8. Choose stillness. Find strength.
On December 7, 1941, the world broke. In a placid Hawaiian harbor on a Sunday morning, the sky filled with enemy planes. In less than 2 hours, the heart of the U.S. Pacific Fleet was a scrapyard of burning, twisted metal at the bottom of the sea. Over 2,400 Americans were killed. 8 battleships were sunk or crippled. The nation was plunged into shock, then into a white-hot rage. The cry from Washington, from the press, from every corner of the country was for one thing: blood. Immediate, furious, overwhelming revenge. The panic was total. The pressure to do something, anything, was immense. Into this maelstrom of chaos walked Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. He was chosen to take command of the Pacific Fleet and arrived at Pearl Harbor on Christmas Day, 1941. Imagine the scene that greeted him. Sunken dreadnoughts listing in the oily water, shattered buildings, a command structure in disarray, and a pervasive mood of despair mixed with frantic anger. His predecessor had been fired. Everyone expected Nimitz to come in like a storm, to fire the rest of the staff, to order immediate, reckless counterstrikes to satisfy the nation's thirst for vengeance. He did none of those things. Instead, what observers noted was an almost unnatural calm. He toured the devastation, his face grim but composed. He met with the existing staff and, to their astonishment, kept them on. He listened more than he talked. He was seen taking long, solitary walks, hands clasped behind his back, thinking. While the rest of the world screamed for action, Nimitz chose stillness. This was not passivity. It was not indecision. It was a weapon. It was the watchman at his post, refusing to be swept away by the chaos storming the gates. It was the deliberate choice to create a pocket of quiet deliberation in the middle of a screaming hurricane. The world is designed to provoke a reaction from you. Your inbox, your social media feed, the 24-hour news cycle, the demands of your boss, the anxieties of your family. It is a constant, relentless siege on your peace of mind. It is a conspiracy against clarity. It wants you to be agitated, angry, distracted, and impulsive. Because when you are reactive, you are predictable. And when you are predictable, you are controllable. The winning attitude, the attitude of the vigilant watchman, is to refuse to play this game. It is the discipline of tuning out the noise, of controlling your impulses, of making decisions from a place of calm clarity, not emotional reactivity. Stillness isn't weakness. Stillness is the ultimate source of strength. Nimitz's stillness allowed him to see what the panic-stricken missed. A reactive mind would have seen only the 8 sunken battleships, a catastrophe. Nimitz's calm mind saw what was not there. The Japanese had failed to hit the base's fuel depots. They had not touched the submarine base. The vital repair yards were intact. And most importantly, the 3 American aircraft carriers were not in the harbor. They had been at sea and were untouched. Panic sees only the problem. Stillness sees the problem, the context, and the opportunities that lie hidden within it. This clarity, born from stillness, allowed Nimitz to do something crucial, to listen. He put his trust in an eccentric, brilliant, and often dismissed intelligence officer named Joseph Rochefort, a man who wore a robe and slippers to his code-breaking office. It was Rochefort's team who, against all odds, cracked enough of the Japanese naval code to believe they knew the enemy's next move, a surprise attack on a tiny, strategically vital atoll called Midway. A reactive leader, driven by ego and rage, would have dismissed this intelligence as too risky, too uncertain. But Nimitz, from his place of quiet deliberation, listened. He weighed the evidence, and he made one of the boldest gambles in military history. He set a trap. He committed his only 3 carriers to an ambush. It was a decision that came not from a fit of anger, but from a state of profound, calculated calm. 6 months after the disaster of Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy annihilated the Japanese carrier fleet at the Battle of Midway, a victory that turned the tide of the war in the Pacific. It was a victory born not on the decks of the ships, but in the quiet, thoughtful walks of their commander months earlier. You are not the commander of the Pacific Fleet, but you are the commander of your own life, and the siege is just as relentless. How do you cultivate this stillness? First, you must tame your inputs. You are not required to have an immediate emotional opinion on every outrage that scrolls past your screen. You have the right to be uninformed on topics that do not concern you. Start your day with quiet, not with chaos. Don't open your email or social media for the first hour. Go for a walk, read a book, journal. Create a space of stillness before the world tries to invade. Second, you must practice the strategic pause. When the provocation arrives, the infuriating email, the market dip, the personal insult, you must build a circuit breaker into your brain. The Roman Emperor Augustus had a rule. Whenever he was angry, he would slowly recite the entire Latin alphabet before saying or doing anything. This is a tactic for creating space. Take a walk around the block. Sleep on it. Give your rational mind, the watchman, time to get to his post before your emotional army charges blindly out the gates. And finally, you must embrace solitude. Find time to be alone with your thoughts without a screen. As the philosopher Blaise Pascal noted, all humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This is not boredom. This is processing. This is where you connect ideas, untangle problems, and see the bigger picture. Stillness is not the absence of activity. It is the presence of clarity.
Chapter 9. The Joy of the Game. On February 14, 1884, Theodore Roosevelt, a vibrant 25-year-old New York assemblyman, was on top of the world. He was a rising political star, and 2 days earlier, his beloved wife, Alice, had given birth to their first child. He was living a life blessed by fortune. Then the telegrams arrived. The first reported that his wife was ill with a sudden fever. The second, that his mother, back in the family home in Manhattan, was also gravely ill with typhoid. He rushed from Albany to be with them. He arrived at the house of death. In the early morning hours, his mother died. 11 hours later, in the same house, his wife died in his arms. On a single day, he lost the 2 most important women in his life. In his diary that night, he drew a thick black X across the page and wrote a single, crushing sentence beneath it. "The light has gone out of my life." What do you do when the world collapses on you like this? When fate delivers a blow so cruel, so absolute, that it seems to have no meaning other than pure destruction? Most people would break. They would be consumed by bitterness, by grief, by a sense of cosmic injustice. They would retreat from a world that could inflict such pain. Roosevelt did something else. After a period of deep mourning, he finished his term in the assembly. Then he turned his back on the life he knew. He went west, to the brutal, unforgiving badlands of the Dakota Territory. He bought a ranch.
This asthmatic, bespectacled intellectual from New York threw himself into the harshest life he could find. He rode for days on the open range, hunted grizzly bears, endured blistering summers and soul-crushing winters. He once chased a trio of boat thieves for 3 days down a frozen river to bring them to justice. He wasn't just distracting himself. He was choosing to engage with life on its most primal terms. He was taking the pain, the emptiness, the void, and instead of letting it consume him, he was choosing to feel something else. The searing cold, the ache in his muscles, the burn in his lungs, the thrill of the chase. He was choosing to live what he would later call the strenuous life. He was choosing to find a brutal kind of joy not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. This is the final and most profound attitude of the Watchman. It's the capstone that locks the entire fortress into place. It's a philosophy summed up in 2 words by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who knew his own share of suffering. Amor fati, a love of fate. Now, don't let the word love fool you. This isn't a passive, sentimental acceptance of whatever happens. It's not shrugging your shoulders and saying, well, I guess this is my life now. That's resignation. Amor fati is the opposite. It is an active, enthusiastic, even joyful embrace of everything that happens to you. The good, the bad, the ugly, the devastating. It's the Watchman who sees the approaching army and instead of despairing, feels a surge of adrenaline and thinks, a chance to prove our strength, a chance to test our walls. It's taking the lesson from Chapter 7, the obstacle is the whetstone, and taking it one step further. It's not just using the obstacle, it's learning to love the obstacle because it is inseparable from the path itself. Life does not offer an a la carte menu where you can pick the victories and the promotions and leave the failures and the heartaches. It is a package deal. The possibility of success is inextricably linked to the risk of failure. The joy of love is tied to the terror of loss. To wish for a life without problems is to wish for a life without growth, without challenge, without meaning. Amor fati is the decision to say yes to the whole package. How do we practice this? It begins with a simple shift in language. Stop saying, I have to do this. Start saying, I get to do this. You don't have to go to a difficult meeting. You get to practice your skills of persuasion and patience. You don't have to deal with a crisis. You get to demonstrate your resilience and calm under pressure. This isn't just a semantic trick. It reframes every task from a burden to an opportunity. But the deeper practice is to see your life as a game. The point of a great game is not just to win. A true competitor doesn't just love the moment the final whistle blows and they are victorious. They love the whole thing. They love the exhausting training sessions, the strategy meetings, the ache in their muscles, the roar of the crowd, the skill of their opponent, the feeling of leaving everything they have on the field. They love the game itself. This is your game, your life. The challenges, the setbacks, the unexpected turns, they are not flaws in the game. They are the game. To love your fate is to choose to find joy in the playing of it with all your heart, regardless of the score. Theodore Roosevelt went to the Badlands a broken man. He emerged forged into the character we remember. Tough, resilient, overflowing with a vitality that would eventually carry him to the presidency. He did not let the tragedy define him by breaking him. He used it as fuel. He learned to love the strenuous life, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. He learned to love the game. This is the ultimate attitude of the fortress. A foundation of knowledge, walls of skill, and a watchman who practices stillness and sees obstacles as opportunities. But what animates that watchman? What gives him his unshakable spirit? It is amor fati. It is the cheerful, courageous, and unbreakable decision to look at whatever fate throws at you, the sunshine and the siege engines, and to say with all your heart, thank you. This is what I was made for. More, please.
Conclusion. The fortress is a launch pad. For nearly 700 years, the castle of Crac de Chevalier stood on a hill in Syria, a masterpiece of military architecture. It was a fortress so perfect, so imposing, that it was deemed utterly impregnable.
It withstood sieges. It intimidated armies. Its walls were a testament to the power of stone and strategy. And yet, today, it is a ruin, a magnificent, empty shell. A fortress built only for defense, no matter how strong, eventually becomes a prison, and then a tomb. Its purpose becomes to simply exist, to passively resist until time, neglect, or a change in the technology of war renders it obsolete. If you have read this far, you may be thinking that this is what we have been designing: a place to hide, a psychological bomb shelter where you can cower from the chaos of the world, safe behind your knowledge, your skills, and your attitude. You would be wrong. The iron triangle is not a blueprint for a shelter. It is the blueprint for a command post. The purpose of building this inner fortress is not to hide from the world. It is to create a secure base of operations from which you can launch yourself into it. Think about what we have built. We began by laying a foundation of knowledge, not as a collection of trivia, but as a deep understanding of reality. We learned to see the terrain, not just the map, like Tristan Jones. We plundered the armory of the greats, making their wisdom our own, as patented. We wove it all together into a latticework of mental models, a library in our head, like Franklin's Junto. This foundation gives you clarity. It ensures you are operating on solid ground. Upon this foundation, we built the walls of skill. We embraced the patient, difficult work of the craftsman, like John Harrison, turning theory into capability. We honed the meta skills of communication, the force multiplier that Churchill used to rally a nation, and we learned the most difficult skill of all: how not to be duped by our own biases, avoiding the fate of the geniuses at long-term capital management. These walls give you capacity. They are what allow you to act effectively in the world. And guarding it all, we posted the attitude of the watchman. This guardian, steeped in stoic resolve, sees every obstacle as a whetstone, a chance to get sharper. He chooses the stillness of Nimitz in a crisis, allowing for clear thought when others are panicking. And he has learned to love his fate, to find the brutal joy in the game itself, as Roosevelt did in the face of crushing loss. This watchman gives you resilience. He ensures that nothing, not failure, not chaos, not tragedy, can ever truly defeat you. Look at this structure: a foundation of clarity, walls of capability, and a guardian of indomitable will. Is this a place for hiding, or is it the ultimate launchpad? When you know that your foundation is solid, you can afford to take risks. When your skills are sharp, you have the confidence to make bold moves. When your attitude is unshakable, the fear of failure loses its paralyzing grip. You are free. Free to be ambitious, free to be daring, free to be generous. A person operating from a fortress of the mind can afford to be magnanimous in victory and gracious in defeat, because their self-worth isn't on the line with every outcome. They can listen to criticism without crumbling, because their identity isn't fragile. They can act with courage, because they know that even a catastrophic failure is just another whetstone to sharpen them for the next fight. They can withstand the loneliness of a difficult decision because they have the stillness to trust their own judgment. The fortress is what allows you to leave the safety of the harbor and sail out into the storm, not just to survive it, but to harness its winds. Your work is not over. It has just begun. The blueprint is in your hands, but the structure is not yet built. You must be the architect, the mason, and the watchman. The task is before you, a daily practice for the rest of your life. Start laying the foundation today. Pick up a book and read with a pen in your hand. Get your hands dirty. Go to the source.
Build your walls, one brick at a time. Do the work. Embrace the tedium of deep practice. Write that difficult email with clarity. Speak with conviction. Question your own assumptions before someone else does it for you. And post your watchman at the gate. When you face a problem today, pause and ask, what virtue can I practice? When the world screams, choose stillness. When you are tempted to despair, find the joy in the game. This is the great work. It is the work of building a life that is not fragile, not a facade like the Anhalter Bahnhof, but a formidable structure like the Pantheon that can withstand the centuries. A life that doesn't just endure the storms of fortune, but uses them as fuel to go further, faster, and higher than you ever thought possible. Build something that lasts.